So Scott's using earbuds. Okay.
Two people who work from home. I don't think you want to hear everything.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
We
6.
have a quorum. It looks like we're missing Kevin, Bill, and Rudy.
Correct. So we'll give them a little bit of time.
Okay.
Just a couple minutes. Just upon us. So why don't we wait 1 minute and see if Kevin joins us, but this is a pretty good group. We have a lot of new faces.
Big turnover.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. It's good to see a good turnout. As I mentioned, a lot of, I won't say new faces, we know many of the faces, but new appointees. So welcome to the Ordinance number 152 Citizens Oversight Panel. We appreciate your voluntary service. We'll talk a little bit about the role and purpose when we get to discussion items. But first, we need to go out and see if there's any members of the public who have comments on any items that are not on the agenda. We do have 4 attendees, 5 attendees now. So maybe, I guess we could check the phone number, Joelle, and see if in fact that might be Kevin participating by phone.
So the phone number ending in 754. May you please identify yourself?
Okay.
Now we have 2 phone numbers there.
Now let's try the other one.
The phone number ending in 375. Can you please identify yourself?
Hi, this is Kevin. I couldn't get Zoom running. I'm still messing with the computer, so I came in on the phone line.
Okay.
Perfect.
So he's on. And because he's calling in, Dave, I can't promote him to panelist, but I'll leave his mic unmuted so that way he can participate in the meeting.
Sounds good. And we have 5 other participants in observing. So since it's such a new group, even though there are some holdovers and some reappointees from different ways, let's go around and introduce yourselves and just where you're from, who appointed you. And
Dave, before we do that, can we call the roll?
Yeah. Okay, let's do roll call. Joelle, you want to do that?
Yes. Panel member Cavani,
Here.
panel member Campbell,
Here.
panel member Chrislock,
Here.
panel member Melton,
Here.
panel member Rachel,
Here.
panel member, and Dave, you're gonna have to help me with this. It starts with a U.
Urquhart.
Urquhart.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, here.
Panel member Peak. Panel member Dick.
Sure.
Panel member Fisher.
Here.
And before we do go to comments from the public, again, we've now heard from everybody, but I guess starting with you, Susan, if you could tell us where you're from and who appointed you.
Yes, Susan Schiavone. I'm from Seaside, Division 1, and I was originally appointed by Brenda Lewis, and then Alvin Edwards has continued me. So I've been here since, is it 2017?
Awesome.
Isn't that
And you've
long?
been, yeah, not that long.
Yes, so.
Jason, how about yourself?
Thank you, Dave. I was appointed by by George Riley most recently, but I started way back with Judy Lehman. So I'm not sure how long I've been around, but I think since about the time this panel started.
Yes, I think so. And Melody?
I live in Carmel. I was appointed by Safwat Malik just recently.
Excellent. Glad to have you. Marley?
I live in Carmel Valley, and I was appointed by Karen Fall.
Excellent. Mike?
I live in Carmel by the Sea, District 5, and was appointed by Amy Anderson.
And Kevin?
I think I'm on the Zoom as well as the phone.
Yeah, so if you're seeing it through Zoom, are you now in Zoom by any chance?
Okay, let me go ahead and promote him.
Yeah, let's see what we can do there.
Promote to panelist. There you go.
And Kevin, if you're listening through your computer and you can hear us through the computer, you could drop off the phone. If you're going to participate with the phone as the microphone, then you should turn your speakers off on your computer.
I think I just
Hey.
dropped it. And
Yeah,
I think
perfect.
I'm on video,
Yep, sounds good.
and I can see too much light in the background. I appear as a ghost. I'll have to rectify that in the future. Yes, I was appointed by our county supervisor just recently.
And Kevin is a ghost because he is returning to this oversight role at the district where he was once our head fisheries biologist, now currently with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So Kevin, welcome back.
Less of a ghost than in the witness protection program here.
Yeah, there you go.
Scott?
I was appointed by the Monterey County Association of Realtors. I have a contract with them, and I live in Carmel Valley.
Excellent. And finally, Rudy.
So I live in Pacific Grove, and I was appointed by the Peninsula Taxpayers Association, and been involved in water for a few years now.
Perfect. Joelle, would you call for comments from the public for any item not on the agenda?
Yes, so if you're a member of the public who wishes to make public comment on items not on today's agenda, now's your opportunity to do so by raising your hand or pushing *9 on your phone. It looks like we have 2 members of the public, or actually 1 member, no, now it's 2. So I'll go ahead and share my timer here. And you all can see the timer, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
When you're ready, Safwat Malik, you may present your comment.
Is his microphone open?
Yeah, should be. I'm gonna ask him to unmute again. Safwat Malik. Okay, we'll return back to him. The other person that wishes to make public comment is Director Alvin Edwards. Director Edwards, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Okay, thank you. Hey, I just want to thank you all for joining the oversight panel. I appreciate it. And I will be listening in every now and then just to find out how you're doing. So I'm glad that we have some new members, and I want to thank those old members for staying on, especially mine, Susan. So I want to thank you. If you have any problems, please let the general manager know, and I'll find out about it. So welcome aboard, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Edwards. Let's try this again with Director Safwat Malik. Safwat Malik, when you're ready, please present your comment. Oh, where did he go?
His microphone still shows muted. Can you unmute him, Joel?
I could only ask him to unmute. For some reason, he just dropped off the attendee side. So I don't know if he's having connectivity issues or what happened.
Okay, let me just see if I've got a note or anything from him. No, nothing.
My Xfinity has been running quite slow. I'm getting a little warning, so maybe he's on the same service band that I am.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, if he comes back, we'll give him an opportunity to speak whenever we see him back. Okay.
Do not see any hands raised, so I'll return this back to the panel.
So our first item is an action item. It's adoption of the minutes. Mr. Laredo, would you explain to the panel that they can approve the minutes even though they may not have been here for the last meeting as new appointees?
Yes, you are not attesting to the accuracy. You're merely accepting it as part of the ordinary course of business. And that is, you do not have to attend a meeting to have a role in accepting the minutes.
So with that, I'd look for a motion to approve the minutes or any questions on the minutes before the motion. And a second.
Move
I
to
have a
approve.
question.
Yep.
Could I ask a question quick? On item 5 in the minutes, we had discussed about delinquencies in payment from CalAm, and the information wasn't available from them because they considered it private. The district was going to look into that. Did that ever happen? Did we get any information about that?
So Suresh is on. We didn't get any information, but Suresh has a belief, and you can jump in here anytime, that on the user fee, they may be paying us based on billings and not net collections, because
Okay.
we've not seen a COVID-related drop in our collection of the user fee.
Okay. I was
That
just
is
wondering.
correct, Lynn.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that is correct. We feel that typically the fee is supposed to be based on the actual collections, but we feel because we haven't seen a significant drop, my guess is that they are paying on what's being billed out to the customers and not what's being collected.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that.
Did we get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. And is this a roll call?
Yes.
Everything's a roll call these days, isn't it? Go ahead, Joel.
Member Fisher,
Yes.
Member Dick,
Yes.
Member Peak, absent. Member Urquhart,
Yes.
Member Rachel,
Yes.
Member Melton,
Yes.
Member Chrislock,
Yes.
Member Campbell,
Yes.
Member Kivani,
Yes.
and motion passes on a vote of 8 and with 1 member being absent.
Excellent. So moving to discussion items, item 2 is the role and purpose of the committee. I am imagining that most of you have taken a look at the mission and responsibilities, or the charge, as well as the ordinance itself. They were included as exhibits 2A and 2B, but I did want to highlight a couple of things. And it relates a little bit to the next item, kind of our history as an oversight panel. The water supply charge was implemented in 2012, and there was some contentiousness, especially from both the realtors, due in no small part that the collection mechanism that we chose was to have the assessor collect it as a fee on the property tax bill, and the Taxpayers Association, due in no small part questioning whether this is a fee or a tax. In negotiation back then at the time and implementation of the new fee, it was agreed that we would establish this panel, provide some oversight, and award automatic positions to both the Realtors Association and the taxpayers, with the rest of the appointees from the directors. The water supply charge was initiated as both a revenue raising measure because we had lost what was called the user fee at the time through collection on the CalAm water bill. And also because we wanted to raise some money to do some water supply planning activities in a little bigger fashion than the district had done previously. As a result, the Citizens Oversight Panel was created. And what you will kind of glean from both a read of the ordinance and a read of the charge, as well as what we'll talk about in the next item, is there was belief by many that the sole purpose of the water supply charge was to develop water supply projects. What you will see in the second paragraph of the primary function, as well as in the ordinance itself, it was drafted to include water supply management, water demand management, which would be conservation, water augmentation, acquiring or reserving augmented water supply capacity, engineering, property acquisition, and for reserves to meet cash flow needs. To date, that's not really been done, and all the money has generally been spent for water supply, both the physical costs related to water supply projects, as well as the personnel and services costs related to those same projects and their operation. And then there was an additional requirement that no more than 15% shall be used for general administrative overhead, which is always one of the focuses, again, of our strong watchdog members of this committee on an annual basis. And Suresh will show you later in one of the exhibits, where that is calculated. And then process, we've deviated a little bit from this from time to time. Originally, we had a January meeting scheduled, but because of the changeover in the board and all the new appointees, it was pushed out to March, which likely means we won't have an April meeting because we don't want to go March and April. We tried to set it up quarterly. So we'll try to shift back to this schedule. There have been a couple of years where we only met 3 times. One of the changes that we have done is instead of developing the annual report, which is an advisory report to the board doesn't have to act on any of the recommendations or statements of this panel. We've kind of moved that to October for drafting the report, January meeting for approving the report, and then submitting it to the board at the beginning of the calendar year. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. The composition and structure, you understand, the ordinance is there for your reading. This is all just background material, but I wanted to see if anybody had any questions or concerns or anything that they want to share related to this topic. And by the way, usually when we're in like panel view, if you raise your hand to the screen, that works just as well as the
Got it.
Yeah. So Melody.
So I just want to understand this clearly. So the water supply charge, was this originally done because what I see on my CalAm bill, the MPWMD user fee was not being collected?
Correct.
Okay, so how does that now correlate with the money that they are collecting and the money that you're collecting? How much money are we talking about on each side of this equation?
Yeah, so we're going to actually get into that in the last items. Suresh is going to cover that, and we've got some graphics as well. Interestingly, the fee was reinstated in, Suresh, I'm going to get this wrong, I think in 16, and it took us almost a year to actually get it back on the CalAm bill because of some resistance inside the PUC. From their standpoint, the administrative law judge who banned it didn't like the Supreme Court's decision that reinstated it and still kind of fought us a little bit on the reinstatement. So it took a full year. At that time, I believe it was April 2016, not knowing that it was going to take a whole year, our board established a policy of collecting both charges for a 3-year period minimum to see what the predictability and stability of the user fee might be versus the water supply charge, and then examine some of the issues related to sunsetting or retiring the water supply charge. So if you look in the ordinance, this is Exhibit 2B, what you will see as a continuing point of discussion, I won't say contention, but I'll say discussion, is section
10.
10. Thank you, Dave.
It's on page 20 of your packet.
Which says in item C, notwithstanding blah, 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 that we would not collect the water supply charge, beginning in 2018-19, if we didn't identify a project. Well, we did. We had ASR expansion and Pure Water Monterey, both of which are still ongoing. It doesn't mean that it automatically retires when the projects retire. We've secured a loan with it and some other things. So we met the A clause, but the B clause is, to the extent alternative funds are available via a charge collected on the CalAm water bill. So what that means is that to the extent funds are available with the reinstatement of the user fee, then we would examine retiring or sunsetting a portion or all of the water supply charge. And so that's been a big discussion point among this panel member group. And Susan was kind of in those battles, and Jason, you were in those battles when we were much more, or not much more, but a divided panel where we had some very strong advocates that focus in on that 15% overhead and the level of collections, and when are you going to sunset this charge and get rid of it? And so that's continuing discussion that you're going to pick up the mantle of and carry forward. We're going to talk a little bit about that in one of the upcoming items in terms of trying to manage these expectations. But that's been a real, I'll just call it a point of contention on this panel, which is, you said you'd get rid of this charge. I'd like to see you get rid of this charge. When are you getting rid of this charge? And that's kind of counterpointed to, look, you're actually building a water supply. You need this charge. You've secured debt with this charge. The debt's not retired. The wording in this charge says you can use it for those other things. You may need it for those other things. Until all those other things are resolved, don't sunset this charge. And that's going to be a constant discussion about where are we and where can we go. And so anyway, expect that. And that probably came out a little bit in your reading of item 3 with the annual reports. Some of the other favorable things that this panel has done is recommended our local water project funding, small level grants for local water projects. We did a couple $100,000 to Pacific Grove for their local project, which is a real project producing water. Same for the Pebble Beach companies, Del Monte Golf Course. The airport did a project to save some wells and so forth. Anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but Melody, the answer to your question is we will cover that. And that is the focal point of a lot of the discussion on this panel. Any other questions or concerns? Rudy.
Dave, just 2 quick questions, and you can cover them briefly. So on item 15, the charges are based on 30,509 parcels, and I think there are more hookups. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between parcels and actual hookups? And the other thing is, could you talk a little bit more about the loan amount taken, when it was taken, et cetera?
Yeah, sure. Suresh, you want to address both of those? I mean, the difference in parcels and hookups is there's multiple hookups on a single parcel. The number of connections in the CalAm systems, about 38,000, ignoring some of the fire hookups. And it varies year in and year out between 38 and 39. Suresh, on the Rabobank, now Mechanics Bank loan.
Yeah, and actually, David, just to add on the hookup itself, keep in mind, we don't bill based on the number of hookups. We bill based on the number of parcels, and so the APN. So over the years, that has actually changed. Both the county has merged parcels and they have also split parcels. So there really hasn't been a significant change in the number of parcels in terms of what we originally started with. And the way we track that is basically the amount of collection. And we had budgeted about $3.4 million. And over the years, last 3 or 4 years, the collection, the actual receipt has been somewhat close to 3.4. Some years it has been a little less than 3.4. Some years it has been a little more than 3.4. And that basically goes on based on the delinquent collections. Because if a parcel owner doesn't pay in a particular fiscal year, they turn around and pay in the next fiscal year. So that kind of like makes it offset. So the total collection has always been around 3.4. And then on the Rabobank, I don't remember the actual origination date on top of my head, but I'll get that in just a few minutes here while you guys are talking about other things.
Okay.
And
And
you also have a question from Marley Melton.
yeah, I just wanted to finish on that. Also, if you look in the ordinance section 5, you'll see how it's computed. And table 2 shows the relationship between a parcel and the fee. And that's a methodology that's done. Actually, Rudy, you may recognize it from your Monterey One Water days. Wastewater agencies often do this kind of allocation, and many water agencies do as well. And in our case, it really serves our purpose because we don't own the meter. And so we had to come up with a methodology to assess a fee based on projected water use by the type of use. And so that's the way this fee was structured. It's based on, it's just like your wastewater when you shower and you flush your toilets and so forth. That's not metered use. And so when you pay your wastewater agency, they've done a similar allocation of their costs based on the type of use at a site or at a parcel. And actually COD or PBCSD, so Pebble Beach has the same methodology. And so it's fairly typical, but I think it was a little too new for our community when this was set up and people were scratching their heads, but it is a fairly typical allocation. Marley, you had your hand up?
Yes, just 2 questions. When the Ordinance 152 was enacted, was it widely understood that it was going to sunset, or was it just enacted?
Yeah, when it started, there was no sunset provision. And because of the unpopularity among certain sectors, that provision was added. So I'm not sure it was what I would say widely understood. But it was understood that, and this, think of it, any public agency, at some point, if you're collecting enough revenue for all your purposes from one revenue source, and we've got 3 primary revenue sources we can talk about in a second, then you ought to sunset or reduce, or you can continue to authorize but not collect certain sources. And so in addition to this water supply charge, we have our user fee, which we briefly touched on and we'll talk more about. And then we have a little piece of property taxes that come in. And those are our primary sources. But, public agencies aren't in the business to make and hoard money. There's certain sensibility to building reserves to a level that provides the right level of safety. But, even I would agree. I love this water supply charge. It's very secure. It's predictable. If you wanted to bond against it for debt, which we did basically in the Rabobank loan, it's a secure source. But keep in mind, if you bond against something and it goes 30-year term, then there's no way you can sunset it. So you're kind of torn between the usability of a charge like this and the promises made about a charge like this. And so that's one of our
And Dave, we also have to keep in mind, this is a fee, it's not a tax. Tax you can continue collecting when the original purpose for the tax no longer exists. As a fee, Prop 218 will not let us over collect. We have to match the amount of revenue on the fee for the purposes for which it was enacted. And this was a savings clause. Without this, we would not have been able to sustain this as a viable Prop 218 fee.
So the widely understood may not have been so much at the time, except for the people in the room and the discussion at this panel, but folks like John Tilley and Jeff Davey and some others have done their, and Paul Bruno have, done their best to make sure it's a publicly known issue by speaking at our meetings and things like that.
What percent of total revenue is it this year or last year?
Suresh, and I guess we have to kind of couch that. We do get some reimbursements and grants that are not regular revenues, but go ahead, Suresh.
I'll get that answer in just a second. The origination date for the Rabobank loan was April 2013. And the percentage of water supply charge over our total revenue is, I'm speaking faster than my spreadsheet can open up here. It's 14%.
1-4.
1-4.
But rest assured, if we hit a year where we have no reimbursed projects or grant funded projects, then that percentage would go up. Just for clarification. Yeah.
I was going to say, just to add and give a little bit more information, the user fee is 17% total revenue, and the property tax is about 8% of the total revenue.
8%. 8%.
8%.
8%.
So
Would you repeat that? The user fee is what?
User fee 17%, water supply charge is 14%, and property tax is 8%.
Any other questions on the charge or the mission? And I can tell you that, with Jason here and Susan here, that one of the other, and Scott, you served on this last year, right? I don't know how many meetings you got to attend, but sometimes I refer to this as a good gossip session too. Sometimes when we don't have as much business at hand, we've discussed what's going on in water supply planning and coastal commission and public utilities commission. So it's also a good opportunity to just keep you people as members of the community up to speed as to what's actually going on. I think today, because both Dave Laredo and I have a 3:30 call, we'll kind of skip the gossipy part, but we will try to, go ahead, Jason.
Along the lines of gossipy, litigation is always interesting too. Threats of litigation, where that might be going. Or
so we could touch on that at the end, but we're currently being litigated and contemplating a potential litigation. So anything else? We shift to item 3. Item 3 was also more for your reading. But if you got through the annual reports that, and not every year had an annual report, but you can see that some of these issues we've already highlighted were the key issues for this panel. And they wanted to go out of their way to remind our board that they're watching these key issues and the board needs to eventually, take some action. And so recent concern has been Measure J costs. Can they be paid for with the water supply charge? They haven't actually been really to date. The Mechanics Bank loan is secured by this. So, there's a desire to pay down that loan. There's a balloon payment in 2.5 years coming. The dual collection, which Melody's already highlighted a little bit. And I've mentioned that, the board did have a policy to collect them both for a period of time. And then reserve policies. We've got certain liabilities, just like every public agency has. And if we're funding more of the reserves out of our user fee, that means there's less user fee that can flow over to cover the things being covered with the water supply charge. So there's an interrelationship between the different revenue sources as well. Mentioned local projects, and you can see a year ago, it was Measure J costs, dual collection, and the loan. The only thing that changed was who owned the loan. When Mechanics Bank bought Rabobank, it changed names. And then back in 17, it was the dual collection with the reinstatement of the user fee and the overhead calculation, deficit spending. We've been doing a lot of subsidizing of our water supply projects from other sources. And at that time, we did have a lawsuit that's since passed. And again, back in 2014, similar. So this was included so you could just kind of get a flavor for what the important issues that the panel pushed out to the board to highlight on an annual basis were. And with that, you can read them, but I'll take any questions you might have on them. Seeing none. That's good. Oh, there's Susan. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, are we going to do an annual report for 2020? Is that still?
Yeah, so I think what we're going to end up doing is, because this is new to most of this panel, is to get through to October and then draft a report and make it final at the January meeting and approved by, or received by the board at their January meeting.
Okay, so
And that's probably not a bad idea, because a lot will happen between now and then that's probably going to inform certain discussion.
And the board had discussed baseline for water supply charge back in October. They came up with a plan and they approved kind of a plan on approaching this. Is that moving forward? Is that been adopted by the board?
It has. So, I call that probably step one. It's not a complete policy, but we're going to cover that in the next item, item 4.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions on the, Melody?
Just curious, was the money for the Pure Water Monterey SCIR funded from this or from other sources of your revenue?
I believe this. Suresh, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, that is funded through the water supply project fund. So anything that runs through water supply project fund gets funded through the water supply charge revenue and other sources as well.
And even the operating reserve for Pure Water Monterey, so the first 1,000 acre feet that got put in the ground was paid for by the district and not resold to Cal-Am. So there was no offsetting revenue source. So it was paid for with the water supply charge as well. So there are things like that that aren't just projects, but are operations related.
And we will see more of those details in, I think, in item 6 or something. You will see all of those breakdowns.
Great.
Right. So when this began back in 2013, there was none of this recycled water project was really in the picture.
That's exactly right. We had a joint agreement that
deep water desal.
Yeah, we did some reimbursement of environmental work for deep water desal as an alternative. That's true. And then we had a joint funding agreement. Well, it was a joint agreement with MRWPCA, the predecessor to Monterey One Water, that didn't have a big cost commitment behind it. And so once we agreed to advance Pure Water Monterey, we entered into a joint cost sharing agreement, and we couldn't have done that without this water supply charge. Rudy.
But then do we have, is the 1,000 acre feet or the cost of that carried as an asset, or how is that treated?
Yeah. I got this wrong about 3 months ago, because originally they told me we couldn't carry it as an asset, but Suresh decided to make the case and our auditors agreed. So it's a asset on our balance sheet.
Correct.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anybody else? So let's move on to item 4. And this is going to give you a sense of how interrelated our different sources of revenue are and what we've been doing, as well as address that policy question that Susan raised. So this is basically since the beginning of time that the water supply charge has been collected, July of 2012, through the end of January. So we're missing February. We've spent a lot on water supply related projects, $38 million as the district. A lot of that was the pre-construction costs for Pure Water Monterey, which was, if I get this right, over 12 to 13 million. The ASR backflush pit expansion, and then the chemical building. Some of those things like the SEIR for pure water expansion, the environmental work for deep water desal are included in there, but 38 million is a fairly sizable number. And our people related to water supply is another 11 million. Supplies and services, related to all of that, almost 4 million. Equipment capital, some trucks and things. And then debt service on the Mechanics Bank loan. So all in, that's $55 million that this, district's done to advance water supply in just 9 years. So that's pretty significant. Now, the problem is we've only collected 29 million in this charge, this water supply charge. So, the net under collection is almost 26 million, but we were able to secure reimbursements and grants, and reimbursements include state revolving fund loan reimbursement for Pure Water Monterey, some reimbursement from CalAm for certain component projects. I'll give you an example of another thing that's water supply related, but the Los Padres Dam Alternative Study, which is a fairly expensive project. I think we've spent over $1 million on it. CalAm has spent over $1 million on it. So that's included in there as well. But then we got some grants for basin planning. We got some grants for drought contingency planning. So we did, pretty successfully, $15 million of reimbursements, but that left us with a net subsidy of just under 11 million. And so one of the issues related to sunsetting the water supply charge and the board's step one policy on what we're doing with, both of these major collection mechanisms figures into, well, wait a minute, the water supply charge has not even been sufficient for all of our activities to date. So it's just something to think about. That subsidy comes from property tax, the user fee, and occasionally some other revenues to the extent they're available. Meaning we haven't built up any reserves from the water supply charge. So what happened in October of 2020, and this is the answer to Susan's earlier question, at the recommendation of the Citizens Advisory Panel, the board adopted what I call the first step. And they said, okay, if the user fee in a fiscal year comes in higher than the budget, then the excess should be applied to the following three priorities. Pay reserves to use to pay off the water supply project costs. So that would be that $10 million of subsidy should be reimbursed by the water supply charge collections in all or in part as a priority. The second is to develop a sinking fund to pay off the Mechanics Bank loan, which I think still requires, we set aside 500,000 this year. What we really needed was about 900,000, but we couldn't balance the budget doing that. And all told, we need about 2.7 million over 3 years. So 900,000, 900,000, 900,000, so that we can pay off the balloon payment in 2.5 years from now. So that's and keep in mind that loan is actually secured by the water supply charge. So it's less discretionary than one might imagine. But if we had surplus monies coming from somewhere else, we could always redirect the surplus monies, which is what this is talking about, if user fee collections exceed expectations. And then the third is to build a fund that can be used to offset and sunset this water supply charge. What we don't want to do, and we think is bad operating practice, is to look at 1 year's result and say, hey, we've got an extra $1.5 million that came in on the user fee. So next year, let's reduce the water supply charge by $1.5 million. And then you get into that next year and you're not collecting that $1.5 million surplus for whatever reason, and it's only 600,000. So we think we need to get to kind of a stable point where you know what you can expect that's consistent as a surplus and start using that. So the board did take positive steps to recognize these needs, and the third in line is to sunset. But if you take the first two, if we were to reimburse the full 10.6 million in that little table above and pay off the 2.7 million of the balloon payment for the Rabobank loan, you're basically into 4 years worth of collections of the water supply charge. So you wouldn't be ready to do any sunsetting for 4 years. And there's always an and. We approved the fourth deep well for the Pure Water Monterey project, which would be paid solely out of pay-as-you-go monies from the district, which is almost a single year's collection of the water supply charge. So what we're looking at basically is specific needs just on the water supply side for about 4 to 5 years worth of collections of the water supply charge. So unless the user fee is really spinning off a significant surplus to cover some of these costs, the constant call for sunsetting is something that I don't think we can address at least for a few years. So I just want to have you keep that one in mind. Then there are others who say the Measure J acquisition of the Calam's Monterey water system is going to cost a ton in legal expenses. Where's that money going to come from? And there is a division in the public, and has been on this panel, as to whether this fee should be banked as much as possible, or conversely, this fee should be used for all these three purposes I just identified, and any surplus in the user fee should be used to build up a war chest for litigation. So that's something else we're going to have to think about, both as a board and as this panel. But that's one of those needs that are out there. And then, as I mentioned before, the user fee itself, when it was reestablished and put back on the bill, didn't produce any surplus, because we took all of the conservation surcharges off the bill and the mitigation on the river surcharge off the bill, and we took those expenses and put them into the new reestablished user fee. So for the first year, there was no surplus. The second year, there may have been a slight surplus. I believe this year we're going to see a surplus off the user fee, and that's because rates have gone up, and a percentage of rates that are increasing are, it's an increasing source. But again, going back to the ordinance and your oversight role and this provision about sunsetting, you have to go back and look and say, to the extent other charges are adequate, that language really comes into play. What is adequate in terms of a user fee surplus so that we can reduce this charge? And that, I think that's gonna be a challenge for all of us for the next 3 or 4 years. So hopefully some of you stick it out and see it through, but I know it's gonna be a constant source of conversation. And then the Measure J stuff will kind of enter its process into what is it going to cost us? Do we get past a bench trial? Well, do we do a condemnation action? That's step one for the board. Do we get sued along the way? We're into a bench trial. Just a lot of both legal and consulting expenses. We spent close to, I don't know, 1.8 million so far, something like that, on valuation, feasibility, appraisal fees, attorneys, and so forth. It's not inexpensive. But that's kind of on the sources and uses. Just wanted you to kind of understand the interrelationship between what we do on the water supply side, and the two other areas we spend money on are conservation related activities and environmental stewardship. And then we spread the administrative overhead across all three cost centers. And they need money too. So we're not even talking about what their portion of the budget is, but they're funded primarily from the user fee and property taxes currently, as well as some permit fees for the conservation and water demand division. Yeah, Jason. You're on mute. Still on mute.
Muted.
Sorry, I didn't. Normally I can just press the space bar and unmute, but I guess this time it didn't work.
Well, Mayor Oglesby has been coming up with a method to keep that mute on all the time.
Yeah, no, I know he's been working on that. But you said you pointed out the other deep well, and I just want to point out that the great news about all these monies being spent is that we did actually provide a water supply with this. So there's actually water coming from all this this money. And
good point.
And the one thing you pointed out was expenditures on the deep well, which I consider real tangible, a direct relationship to the water supply. But you didn't mention anything else other than the less tangible, like the litigation and Measure J and things like that. But are we potentially going to need some of these funds to perhaps do the expansion, or do you see other more tangible, projects along the line that these funds might be used for? Thanks.
Yeah, I think seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Our permanent water supply solution is, and I'm not going to proselytize over which one I think is better. I think at this point to the ratepayer, but we're either going to have a desal plant or a pure water Monterey expansion. And if it goes down the path of pure water Monterey expansion, then yes, we're committed to once again fund pre-construction costs. And then we just got an extension. And when I say we, collectively with Monterey One Water, on our EPA, it's called WIFIA. It's a loan program, Water Infrastructure Finance, something or other. It's about a $40 million commitment from the EPA for pure water Monterey expansion. The actual total cost of the project with injection and extraction wells and some pipes and things is closer to 62 million in current dollars. And so it might be 70 million when it happens. The district's in a position to bond for the difference between the WIFIA loan and the total cost, or CalAm, if they're still existing at that time, there's no condemnation proceeding or who knows what, may want to own the extraction wells. So we're not sure what the total public cost component is going to be, but yeah, we would have to likely commit monies to that. Maybe the state revolving fund program will be around. And so the district can only be on a hook for pre-construction costs. It's just hard to say, but yeah, but those are the only major projects out there. We used to have a proposed role in financing the desal project with public debt to reduce the overall cost to the ratepayer. CalAm got commitments, not yet fulfilled, for all of their debt through the state revolving fund loan. So we and our bankers and our bond counsel all unanimously agreed that that was a much better funding source than a somewhat complex public offering. My only concern is during COVID, those funds available got reduced a little bit. So if it does go down the desal path, it's not clear anymore that they have all of the debt covered by the state revolving fund. And so then we may be back in the business of doing a public offering. I don't think it would involve, well, let me back up. It would involve this for the upfront costs, but the actual debt payment would be from a different revenue source. But yeah, I do see the hard costs winding down in the next few years.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Now we will, to be honest, we will have some ongoing capital And I know Mike, like in your case, Mike sits on the board of COD, Carmel Area Wastewater District. You know, they've had a pretty significant capital program, and they've got continuing capital needs. The district's just beginning, because of the additions that we've had to our system. Now we'll need to start developing a capital improvement plan or a renewal and replacement plan. So those kind of new annual costs will need to be funded through this water supply charge as well. So unless the user fee surplus is so big, then there's going to be at least a component of the water supply charge that will be needed just to do ongoing capital maintenance. Okay, anybody else? I'm getting tired of listening to me, so I think we could move to Suresh's item number 5.
I see.
Committee member Chris Locke has a question.
Oh, yeah,
One
Melody,
second.
go ahead.
So what about, I mean, it looks very likely that the expansion is going to get certified, the EIR, but we don't know if Callum's going to buy the water. So what if the district was in the position to buy that water and bank it in the Seaside Basin as a rather huge project?
Yep, and there's been some discussion there. There's kind of 3 related conversations. That's one of them, which is buy the water and bank it. If the expansion were built, Marina Coast Water District may want to share in it and also bank water. Their needs for additional water supply are out in the future. The water master is now looking at protective well levels. So that's, you know, buying whatever available supply can be made available and putting it into the ground at about 1,000 acre-feet a year. Yeah, Melody, absolutely. If we got involved in that, if it's for the water master, maybe you create a separate benefit assessment, or maybe use the water supply charge. It's unclear. And it's also not necessarily something the district just wants to take on, because there's questions as to who caused the deficit. You know, why do we need protective water levels, well levels? Where does Seaside municipal system fit, and all the alternate producers who are independent well owners? But there's places out there that you could do it. If we did pure water expansion to bank water, there's a lot of pluses and minuses to that concept, where you'd have ratepayers paying twice if there's also a desal plant. If there's no desal plant, and we just decided to get started with pure water expansion and put water in the ground waiting for a water purchase agreement, then that would be a huge expense. But yeah, that would have to come from the water supply charge. Okay, seeing no more hands. Suresh, you want to introduce item 5?
Sure. So there were 2 exhibits with item number 5. The first exhibit, exhibit 5A, was the water supply charge receipts. And this exhibit shows for the last 3 years what was budgeted and what was actually collected. And so if you see towards the far right-hand side, fiscal year 2021, the budget was 3.3, and we had purposely reduced the budget from 3.4 to 3.3 for 2021. We were going into COVID. We didn't know what the collection rate for the county was going to be, so we had kind of like reduced our annual water supply charge from $3.4 million to $3.3 million. The first collection that came in December, I'm going to say that we are somewhat in line with the prior fiscal years. It's about 62% of the total fee. So we think the fiscal year end collection total is going to be somewhat close to 3.4. But again, I won't know what the actual collections are until April. That's when the next collection comes in, and the final piece comes in June. So this just shows that we've got about little over $2 million on the collection of the actual receipts. So simple chart. The next chart, Exhibit 5B, is the actual water supply charge of what we call them availability analysis. And that basically shows what was budgeted on the revenue side and expense side against what's actually being collected and spent through December 31st, 2021. And that column is the one that's grayed out, a little with a gray shade. I will make a change going forward. I have had a request from a committee member where I'm basically going to put the newer years to the left and the older years to the right. So it's going to kind of like shift where you'll see 2021 to the left, and then you'll see 2019 and 2018 to 2019. So it's going to go flow from left to right. On the current year, on the current term through December 31st, 2021, you'll see on the revenue side, the water supply charge, which I had shown on the previous chart, it's 2.028. We had capacity fee collections of 236,000 against a $400,000 budget, so tracking right in line for the first 6 months. Pure water Monterey sales. This is the new line item. We've started actually selling water to CalAm customers now. And so we've sold water about $1.5 million. And that the selling of the water and the expense of the water is going to tie out each other. There's going to be a net effect of 0 to the district's budget because whatever we sell, we've actually paid for that water to buy from Monterey One Water. And so you will see a line item on the project expenditure side where it'll say PWM water purchase. And we'll go over those expenses in just a minute here. Property tax revenue, the first collection through December 31st, it's a little shy of 800,000 against a budget of $1.3 million. On the user fee, the 1.2% of the user fee that comes into the district gets allocated to the water supply charge. The actual collections were a little shy of $400,000 against a $610,000 budget. And then we have some interest, about $20,000 against a $100,000 budget, and interest will get caught up for the next 2 quarters because generally we get a lot of interest. The annual booking of the CDs, they all kind of like come in towards the last quarter of the fiscal year. And then reclamation project, a $500,000 revenue collection. And basically what that is last fiscal year in 1920, we spent about $1 million towards a tank rehab on the reclamation project, Pebble Beach reclamation project. And so that term was that they will pay us $500,000 in 2021, and then the next 500,000 will come in 21, 22. So the first 500 did come in November of 2020. So that's what's booked in there. And then some other miscellaneous revenues, about $3,000. So all in all, we had a revenue budget of $7.3 million for the year. We've collected 5.5 through December 31st. And then the middle part of the page, you'll see we go into the expenses. We break out our personnel cost and our supplies and services into direct, indirect. And the reason for that is because we track that 15% of the administrative cost. And so the direct cost, the direct personnel and direct service and supplies are basically booked against the water supply, but then any indirect cost, the goal is to make sure to keep that within the 15% as what was the charge for the committee. So that's why we break out the personnel and the supplies and services between direct and indirect. So you'll see the first line there, direct personnel. And direct personnel costs are basically anybody that's working directly related to the water supply projects, like portion of Dave's salary is tagged as direct. There are some other personnel people within the agency that are tagged direct because they are directly working on the ASR side, or they're working with on the PWM project. So anybody that's directly related to those, they are all deemed as direct. And then on the indirect side, you would see the administrative overhead personnel like Joel's time, my time, some of the other administrative accounting people that basically work on the project itself. Our time is deemed as indirect. So that's the distinction there. So direct personnel was 745,000 against a $1.3 million budget. The direct supplies and services were $50,000 against a $120,000 budget. Legal cost, about $40,000 against 220 budget. And then project expenses and project expenditures reimbursement both say see below. So if you go towards the bottom part of the page, you'll see the project expenditures. And we've kind of like broken out what entails all these project expenditures. And you'll see the first line item is the PWM project. We have a $3.9 million budget. The actual has only come in at 45,000. Most of that bulk of that cost is that $3 million towards the deep injection well that Dave was talking about. That has not materialized yet. I mean, the contract has been awarded, but it's still in the construction phase. So once that gets completed, we will get a bill from Monterey One Water, and we will end up paying that. The Pure Water Monterey project expansion, $750,000 is what was budgeted. We've through the mid-year budget, we've actually reduced that amount. It's not $750 anymore. I believe it's $200,000 now. So you'll see that change on the next quarter. On the PWM project operating reserve, that's the water that has been banked against the operating reserve. And so it's a $1.1 million budget against the actual of 768. And then the Pure Water Monterey project water purchase, this is the one that I was talking about. On the revenue side, you saw a line item for sales. So this is the line item for the water purchase. There's a little difference between the purchase cost and the water cost, and that has to do with the water rates that was established with the project. And basically CalAm had to file a tier 2 advice letter throughout as the project started. So basically there's about $150,000 or something that's left hanging out there that will get billed to CalAm. We just don't know how we'll collect it, whether it's going to be a 1-year collection or it's going to be amortized over a year, 2 or 3 year collection. So we are waiting for the fiscal year to end. Once that ends, we will do all the calculations on that and see what the water cost is going to be for next year, and that's will help determine how we're going to collect that $150,000. ASR project phase 1, $3.9 million budget against a $2 million. There are some bills that's outstanding that came in after December, so you'll see that number go up. On the CalAm desal project, I'm sorry, reimbursement project. By the way, this chart is small. Reimbursement projects, 954,000 against the actual 280. Reimbursement projects are basically the ASR project reimbursement cost. We run the ASR phase 1 project, and any operating cost related to the project, like the electricity and chemicals and supplies, that all gets reimbursed by CalAm ratepayers. And so basically, periodically throughout the year, we bill CalAm to collect those costs. So some of those reimbursement costs are that. We also have some small reimbursement costs from reclamation, Pebble Beach reclamation projects, and a couple other small reimbursement projects. So they all tie out to that line. CalAm desal project, this is the financing structure that Dave was talking about. We did not spend any money, and we have wiped out that money from this fiscal year. So that should be zero now with our mid-year budget process. ASR expansion, there was no money spent on that line item. Other water supply projects, a little about a $1,300 expenditure on that line item. Local water projects, we had a budget of about $300,000. We have not spent any money on that. And then the Measure J feasibility study, $192,000 that was attributed as a cost towards the water supply project line item, and we've spent about $108,000. That's tracking a little bit below than what we had budgeted. Next line item, drought contingency plan. Actually, that's from a last fiscal year, so there's no cost for that. There's the Los Padres long-term plan, $295,000. We don't show any cost there because we are still waiting for some bills on that.
But there will be some.
There will be some, yes.
Hey, Jason, you don't happen to know if the Laguna Grande non-potable water project's ever going to move forward, do you?
Do I know for a fact? We are still talking about it and trying to figure out ways to use that water that's down by Laguna Grande. So
Okay, we might have to extend our grant, because in that 307 local water projects line, I think 107 of it was dedicated to you and might be expiring this fiscal year. I can't recall. I'll look into it.
Yeah, there was an extension for that. I think
Yeah.
it goes throughout this fiscal year, June.
all right, I'll see if maybe some engineers can get with you and let you know where we are on that.
Good.
And then towards the end of that total line, you'll see the indirect cost as percentage of water supply. That's what we track against that 15%. The budget was that it was going to be a 13% as the administrative overhead. So far, to do with the actuals, it's only 9.6%. We always track that. If you look at the historical numbers over the last 3 years, we've never exceeded that 15%. So we are very cautious of that number. And then we jump back to the middle part of the expenditures. There are some other line items there that I won't go in detail, but you'll see all in all, the adopted budget was about $15.3 million on the expense side. We've only expended about $6 million, but there are going to be some heavy ticket items coming in, maybe towards the end of the fiscal year. If not, it'll definitely filter into the next fiscal year.
Great. Any, yeah, Rudy.
Unmute myself here. Suresh, so for the Pure Water Monterey project, water purchase, I'm trying to understand. So are we purchasing the water at about 1,650 per acre foot, or how does that work?
So it's a combination. So for the first month or two, I believe it was 1720. And then actually, no, the cost is 2,442.
Okay.
Is what we are buying it at. But for the first few months, we had to sell the water to Cal-Am, at least for 2 months, at 1720. And then the remainder of the months was sold to them at 2442. So the delta, the difference for those 2 months, were about $600-700 an acre foot for those 2 months, ended up about 150,000. That's what we're going to collect towards the end of the year.
Great. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Hands? Yeah, Susan.
Just have never understood this, and I just want to get clarification on it. When we talk about the water supply charge, the budget is 3,400,000, and then the user fee is so much lower. It's just a portion of the user fee that's listed here.
That's right.
Where does the rest of the user fee go? I was just curious.
Yeah, so remember earlier I said we have 3 cost centers. One is
Right.
Water demand that covers all the conservation and permitting duties, and the other is mitigation, which is
Okay,
habitat and fisheries.
I got it.
Yep.
I just was not thinking. Okay, thank you.
Scott.
So what fiscal year are you, June? I mean, July to June?
July to
Yeah.
June.
July
Yes.
to June. And on the right-hand column, Suresh, it says through 12/31/2021.
Oops. Should be 2020.
Oh, for the final column?
For the final
gonna say
column, it should be through 12/31/2020, because we're only reporting numbers for the 2 quarters.
Okay, well all right. So that, I was wondering about that. I was thought maybe it was going to be, you're projecting that to March 31st, even that. Okay.
No, good call. Everybody.
Just checking.
Yeah, a little typo.
Yeah. Mike. You had your hand
I
raised. Mike?
have a question. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Thank you. My question has to do with the history of the water supply charge from 2012 through 2021. I see on page 6 of 13, Exhibit 2B, as an example, our property, our home, medium size, $16.84. Most recently, our tax assessment was $55.34. So over the 9 to 10 years, on average, what were the increases, or just in a range of increases? And I'm guessing that also depends on type of user classification you would be.
Yeah, that's an
But
interesting
just as
question.
an example,
Yeah, it shouldn't have changed. We haven't changed them since we implemented them. So,
Right, there has been no change since 2012.
oh,
And what Mike's looking at is the 1684 is just the use fee. There's two components to the user fee, the water supply charge.
and I need to add the size of the meter.
The size of
to
the
it?
meter.
right. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So there has
16
been there has
Yes.
been no increase since 2012. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay,
because
I
in order
appreciate
to
that
increase it, we would, yeah, to increase it, we would have to do another
Rate
negative
study.
protest hearing,
Rate study and then
Which-
appropriating hearing.
which we don't have the time or interest in doing.
Got it. Unchanged since inception.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Melody.
Melody?
Just curious what, on a, say on $1 million property, what is the actual cost to the property owner for the water supply charge?
Yeah, so when it's not really based on value, let's say house size. Let's say you've got a 2,000, 4,000 square foot house.
Yeah.
So it's the meter charge is $19.36 typically for a 5/8 inch meter, and then $77 for the rest. So you're looking at whatever, $96 a year.
That's what comes to the water management district, or that's what goes to
Correct.
Counciltown?
Goes to the water management district.
That's the water supply charge.
That's
On
the
a 2
one.
to 4,000 foot house is about $100 a year.
Yeah, and a large house, 4,000 plus square feet is 154 plus 19, so call it 174 a year.
Do property owners that are paying this know, do they have any idea what they're getting for their $100 a year in water supply?
Well, so here's a very funny anecdote. We assess property taxes on all properties in our district. And so Seaside Highlands gets no service whatsoever, but they get to vote for our Division I director and pay property taxes to the district. With respect to the water supply charge, I don't think anyone really knows. I mean, those folks who look at their bill and they see the mosquito abatement district, us and a few others, I think it's at best confusing, and at worst, they look at it and they go, what the heck is this? And some property owners, depending on where you live, you're going to have your school debt identified on the bill that you're paying for because you voted for it, and some other things. And I think that, I don't know, you tell me if you guys spend a lot of time scrutinizing your bill. I do, because I want to see it. I want to see what's on it, kind of out of curiosity. But I don't think people really know what they get for what they're paying.
Yeah, we get on average, about 20 to 30 phone calls a year inquiring about the charge.
It just seems like that would be really important with the water shortage issue that everyone knows is going on, that people understand that this $100 a year that they're paying, like for a large home, how much of that is contributing to solving the water shortage.
Well, we certainly feel better about that conversation now that we're delivering water from Pure Water Monterey. ASR originally was funded through other district revenues and no water supply charge. It's now being covered. It's a little bit difficult for people to wrap their heads around, but yeah, that's a point well made, that we should maybe toot our horn a little bit, because it's nice when you provide service that's visible for money received.
So is it 38 million that you spent, or 55 million that you spent on water supply projects total? I wasn't clear, and you said two different figures.
Yeah, it's 55.
Over how many years?
Since 2012.
Since 2012.
Yep. And, you know, I'm pretty certain there's probably over 1 million, possibly even 2, that are things like studies, you know, Los Padres Dam study, the Carmel and the Salinas and Carmel River Basin studies, the drought contingency plan where we had to match money to the Bureau of Reclamation from the federal government. So there are those things that are tough to wrap your hands around. But then, yeah, the hard costs for water supply projects are significant. Anybody else?
I just real quick, but yeah, say I heard the term used, stranded costs. As far as that goes, like perhaps we could say the 400,000 or whatever it was for the deep water might be a stranded cost.
Yep.
That money spent that went nowhere. There really isn't that much money that got stranded out of there, or that I know of, at least.
No, that's absolutely true, Jason. Nowhere near the close to 40 million for the coastal desalination and regional desalination projects. Okay. And Suresh, you want to move into the next one,
Yeah,
6,
so-
which is about the user fee?
Item 6, colorful chart. So basically the blue bar is what the actual collections are or has been for fiscal year 2021. You'll see we've now got the number that I reported on the previous item was through December 31st, but we do have collections now through February of this year. And so you can see the number varies. I mean, it's kind of like unstable. We really can't predict. We are trying to collect all the data we can over the last 4 years now. And we kind of like can't estimate what the numbers are going to be for the user fee going forward, but it's highly unstable. You can't, you know, pinpoint to a particular month and say this is exactly what it's going to come in as. You can see it definitely varies. So this is just a chart that basically shows the collections not since inception. We started collection since April 2017, but we've dropped the first 3 months. So this is since July 2017 all the way through February 2021. This is what the chart depicts is the actual collection.
Anybody else? So I know this was a lot to absorb. This was a good kickoff. We don't really have time to kind of just yak about what's going on. There was one particular question. Jason mentioned litigation. We are being sued over our CEQA work related to the Measure J buyout. That is not part of a water supply charge covered. It's through because we're not budgeting on a real-time basis for things like that, it'll end up coming from general reserves of the district. And that's the only real active litigation that we have. We've got another one that's kind of being threatened or contemplated, but I can't speak to that right now. And we will, the takeaways I wanted you to have today are really the issues in the past and kind of bring you to current with an understanding that these same issues aren't going away, and we'll be looking to your hearts and minds over what kind of recommendations you want to make to the board. But, you know, as I've kind of laid out for you, we're probably 3 years to 4 years away from even thinking about sunsetting unless we begin to see that the user fee is just churning out so much revenue that we can't really apply it elsewhere. So that'll be something that, you know, this last chart will help inform how we're doing on the other side of our revenue, which is important for you to make recommendations to our board what to do with the water supply charge. But I know it was a lot to absorb, and we appreciate your time. Dave Laredo and I are going to have to hop off in a couple minutes to get on a 3:30 call, which thank you, Rudy, for reminding me. Any
One question by Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin.
And this was a fast question for Suresh. The variance numbers on the bottom of that table, the monthlies, are they kind of meaningless? They're just random variations in CalAM's collection patterns? Is it
No,
really only the right-hand column that matters?
Yeah, the variance column, basically, the variance line is the 2021 collection over 2019, 2020. So just looking at the previous year.
So it's just a
Yeah.
pattern.
Yeah, and there is inherent in monthly reads. Utilities have, I believe, up to 35 days to read your meter and provide a bill. And so depending on the cycle you're on, you could get a 28-day read or a 34-day read. And so month to month, things are going to vary. And then seasonally, of course, due to weather and type of use and so forth, you're going to see variances there. We're a little more interested in the annual totals.
And then the only thing I want to say is that I'm retired as of January. So my last employer was State Department of Fish and Wildlife, but I'm now footloose and fancy free, so to speak.
Oh, wow. Congratulations on that one. I think we all, have that in the back of our minds. Well, there's a lot of retired people on this panel anyway, I see, but, and Suresh is too young to even contemplate it.
You too.
Oh, hey.
Don't even think about it.
Uh-huh.
Don't think about it, Dave.
Suresh needs to keep his day job.
Yeah. All right, thanks, everybody. I'm going to sign off, and thanks for going through a lot of material today. It should get a little lighter, but some of these things will be recurring. So hopefully, as you kind of look at them, you can learn what's in the table. And although Suresh just told us he's going to change one of the tables, but this will be kind of the topic of discussion on a frequent basis. So everybody, thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye all.
We'll see you in a
Thank
couple
you.
months.
And thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Joelle.
Good, Joel.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.